Paul, thank you for coming on the show. And this is an important day in American politics. We have elections in your home state of Virginia, and we also have elections in New Jersey, which is a hotly contested race between Mickey Sherrill and Mr. Chitterelli. So I'm wondering, do you think that we can draw any lessons from these races, or do the outcomes potentially not tell us that much, that American politics is simply in a state of flux?
Well, look, first of all, we're talking about 2 of 50 states, and they each have their own particular circumstances. If it were 2 different states, we would get 2 different outcomes. I think that's a part of it to keep in mind. The other thing, honestly, that I have to say is, in our politics, all sides will take their own lessons from the outcomes, and everyone will have political and communications consultants working pretty aggressively to find silver linings in any clouds that might exist. So I think what we're sort of really talking about is how will these election outcomes fit into the narratives, that the White House and its supporters are trying to build, and that the Democrats are trying to build. Looks increasingly like the Democrats are going to take the governor's race in Virginia. Who knows? We'll know obviously tonight or tomorrow morning about that. New Jersey, as you mentioned, a little bit closer. So in practice, what we're really talking about is, are the Democrats going to win both of those races? And then there's kind of one set of narratives that flows from that, or is it going to be a split decision? And there's kind of a different set of narratives that flow from that, and then I assume the Republicans start to talk about candidate quality and other factors like that, to try to explain why they didn't win both.
Is Mondami, in a way, a Democratic version of Trump, a populist politician who's sort of come out of nowhere, doesn't actually have that much governing experience, and people are amazed that he's going to run, one of the biggest cities in the world?
I'm not sure that I would draw too many parallels between the two of them, because I think there are a lot of differences. Where I think they're both similar is that the elevation of people with limited political experience, and of course in the president's case, he has actually been president once at this point. So we're talking about earlier in his career. But I think what is elevating the two of them, other people like that, is the fact that the American people are kind of tired and frustrated with the political system that we've had and the results that it's delivered. We had, certainly a huge flashing red light for decades, really, in the low public approval rating of the Congress. The Congress...
In fact, all of our institutions, the Supreme Court was the last bastion, and its numbers have plunged.
Correct. And I think in an environment like that, where people are frustrated with, let's call them sort of the traditional institutions and traditional voices and mainstream approaches, then they become much more flexible in listening to and thinking about new ideas, whether those are on the right, on the left, or frankly somewhere else entirely, because what do right and left even mean in a context in which there's a lot of really shuffling of positions, and the parties and the coalitions that back them are breaking apart and recombining in new and different ways.
One of the reasons that these elections occupy such outsized importance is because Donald Trump has, in many ways, broken the template of American politics. He has literally demolished part of Washington, namely the East Wing of the White House, and he is trying to rewrite the DNA, right, the code of American politics. Now, the Washington Post is reporting that Democrats, former Biden administration staffers, are suffering from Trump envy, which is to say that they admire his willingness to smash down barriers that have obstructed the policies that he wants to enact. He's been, in fact, a transformative president. Do you believe, and the Democrats are saying, well, we should start behaving like Trump. Do you think we've moved permanently into a new era?
Well, I think it's a little more complicated than that. I do think that the president and his approach, it's a reflection of the same dynamic of people being frustrated. And when you're frustrated, you kind of want to break log jams and smash things and find a way to do something. And people who can do things, start to look appealing. I think where the president and his agenda are concerned, I think it's a little bit not yet far enough into his administration to determine whether any of this is actually successful. The smashing things is quite successful. That's working. The policy and real life outputs from that for Americans, I think, are still a little less clear. So I would probably contain my envy, for another 6 months or a year to see how it all turns out.
Let me put it to you in a different way, which is Trump's detractors, and there are many of them, depict him as an authoritarian who is running roughshod over American democracy and acting in what they call unprecedented ways. Now, those were the same accusations that were lodged at Franklin D. Roosevelt after 1932. He was called an American Caesar who was destroying the American Republic, and that he was trying to assume dictatorial powers. I'm not saying that Trump is successful in enacting these policies, that the policies themselves are a success, but does some of this complaining about Trump amount to whining, whereas it's liberals complaining that he's being, kind of successful and doing what he wants, and that if it was a Democrat doing it, they wouldn't use those terms of opprobrium to describe what's transpiring?
It's hard to say. I suspect there's a lot to what you're saying. I do assume if it were a Democrat that there would be sort of some Democrats who supported that and some others who had questions. And I think where Trump is concerned, we've seen that there are some Republicans that support that and some who have questions. So I think that's, a reality of our polarized political system. I think particularly where the kind of creative legal interpretations are concerned, we've been building toward that over a period of decades.
In both domestic and foreign?
In both domestic and in foreign policy, in both Republican and Democratic administrations. And it's been ultimately driven by the failure of the Congress, regardless of whose control it's been under, or whether it's been divided control or whatever, to produce outcomes that satisfy Americans. So I think that's the driving problem, is that the Congress is sort of failing to fulfill its constitutional role, and isn't really working in the way that the founders hoped that it would work. And that allows, and in some sense even forces, the President of the United States to take a more active role, because there is kind of a frustrated and angry electorate that's not getting what it wants. And I think, one can have sort of different views about what the president is trying to do from a policy perspective, and I'm setting aside the how, and just focusing on the what for a minute. One can have different points of view on that, but a lot of it is responding to actual voter anger and frustration. Again, maybe it's the right approach, maybe it's the wrong approach, but, the immigration policy, the tariff policy, and the idea of bringing manufacturing back, these are both pointed at jobs. If you look across 40 years of public opinion polling, and where Americans have been asked about the issues that are most important to them, that's always been one of the top handful of issues for Americans. And I think even more now, in an era when we had really pretty unprecedented economic success, but much less success in sharing the benefits of that. And now I think the political leaders who allowed that to occur are paying the price.
Now, Paul, the latest polls that have been coming out are pretty bleak, both for Trump and for perceptions about America. Politico had a poll where the majority of Americans now believe that the American dream is dead. And Trump's unfavorability rating is at about 63%. What happens to this diffuse anger, discontent, a sense of aggrievement that you're talking about? Can it be capitalized on by someone other than Trump and take us into an unexpected direction?
Well, I think, the first thing always to keep in mind is that we're talking about something that really ultimately rests on the combined impact of the individual psychology of a large number of people. And that's something that can actually change overnight to become more optimistic, much more pessimistic. But
the trend lines are clear. I mean, American presidents have basically been quite unpopular by the end of their terms, whether it's George W. Bush or, even I think Obama did okay, but we pretty much turn on our presidents. I mean, I don't think there's been I think the Clinton era, even there, he bombed by the end.
Look, the president's policies will either succeed or they won't. And in the period that we're in right now, the president can put his own framing onto his policies, and that's been successful to some extent, but probably not to quite the extent that he hopes, because of the polling numbers that you shared reflect the fact that it hasn't entirely worked. But by the time we get to the end of his term, people will have made up their minds, and he will be a hero and one of America's greatest presidents, and really transformational, or he'll be something else, and time will tell. But I think one of the really critical questions for the country, which I think isn't really getting too much attention right now for understandable reasons, is actually who comes next. Because in an environment like the one we have now, of this great frustration with past approaches, the great frustration with conditions in the country, the great willingness to kind of try new approaches and listen to and support new people, there is really an unprecedented, in many respects, kind of opportunity, or potentially danger that arises when the president leaves office and someone else moves in, and that might be a person who is, look, the president, I think, is quite vigorous, but it could be someone sort of younger and more vigorous, and perhaps somewhat more willing to listen to the advice of people who really know intimately how the government works, and could make even more effective use of the executive branch's great capabilities. So I think there are a lot of possibilities for what could happen over the next few years. Some of them are really amazing. Some of them, might be a little bit scary.
What about, since we're talking about the future and the amazing things that could occur or not occur, AI seems to be almost single-handedly propping up the stock market. Mm-hmm. I was just looking today. Palantir is up 185% this year. But it's just a few companies that are propelling the stock market. Are you optimistic or pessimistic about what's going to occur?
I think I'm actually fundamentally optimistic there, and that doesn't mean that I necessarily believe in like a straight line. We may see, and I expect that we will see, ups and downs. But I am fundamentally optimistic. It's not unlike the dot-com bubble that people our age, may remember from almost 30 years ago at this point. That was a case where the stock market was kind of bidding up the value of companies that weren't actually making money and didn't necessarily even have products. In this case, we're talking about actually not only the market being driven up by these companies, but actually American GDP growth being propped up by these companies, which are contributing, I don't remember the exact figures, but probably more than half of the economic growth that's happening in the country right now is attributable to these countries because of the vast amounts of money that they're spending to build out the data center infrastructure and the cables and the electric power and all of the,
It's
you know,
kind
the
of a
water
private, yeah.
and I mean, in some ways, you know, it's like you know, a new industrial revolution in terms of the scale of what's happening. And when you talk about, you know, multiple companies that have these multiple $trillion market valuations and are investing individually hundreds of billions of dollars in the American economy. I mean, if we think back to the post-COVID government relief plan, or for that matter,
Yeah.
the post-financial crisis relief plan, you know, when we had the federal government spending hundreds of billions or $1 trillion
This
or
is sort of
more,
a private Build Back Better.
it is. I mean, it is actually. And, you know, for a president who kind of hates inflation, you know, I think there's sort of a question there to think about. And there are real limitations in the American workforce, which is going to lead to, you know, I suspect, particularly in some of the trades, really a bidding war among some of these companies for a scarce workforce.
So, Paul, it sounds like, despite the turbulence that we're experiencing, you're pretty bullish on America's future.
Well, look, I mean, yeah, I am bullish on America.
I mean, this is very refreshing
you know,
to hear. I mean, it's,
we have strong fundamentals, Jacob. We have strong fundamentals.
we always have.
And we have. And there are a lot of challenges. There are a lot of problems. It's going to be tough. We didn't touch on any of the foreign policy pieces. The international environment is not a forgiving one at this point if the United States makes mistakes, and we got to keep that foremost in our minds. But I think there are really some tremendous possibilities. We just need to get our act together. And you know, first and foremost, that means, you know, the 5-mile radius of downtown Washington needs to get its act together. And if we do that, I think we have some really great successes ahead.
Well, your optimism is very, very reassuring. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.